Finish Strong Friday, and we got a big show for you today. We got somebody from the Department of Defense, from the military on today, talking about what's happening in leadership. Episode 187 of Standing Out. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Trey Griggs here, Beta Consulting Group, and you know what today is. It is Finish Strong Friday. Whatever you are doing today, make sure that you get after it. It's going to be a much better weekend if you give it your all today. Don't slow down early. Don't stop early. Go all the way through the day and finish strong, whatever it is that you've got on the plans for today. Maybe even do a little bit extra if you can. And have a great weekend moving into the weekend this weekend. All right, so if you like this shirt and you want to grab this just to remind yourself of that, you can go to our swag shop at shop.betaconsultinggroup.com. You can pick up this as well as other hashtag shirts just to remind you to give it a little bit extra and pursue excellence. And make sure you use coupon code THANKFUL, all caps, because it is Thanksgiving season and we are less than a week away from Thanksgiving. That is hard to believe. That is crazy. But make sure you put that coupon code in, Thankful, and get 20% off your entire order. And be sure to send us a picture when your merch arrives. Throw it on, take a picture. We'd love to highlight you. That would be awesome. Mike, thanks for joining the show today. Mike Solomon. You don't want, okay, doesn't want those anymore. Let's text. All right, no big deal. All right. Hey, listen, so we are excited for what's happening today. We got some good things going. We got a great show. And we're going to jump into that in here just a minute. We've had a great week of shows. In case you missed any of those shows, we had a special at the Women in Trucking on Monday. You can go back and check that out, as well as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Great shows this week. You can catch them on demand or anywhere that you get podcasts. You can drop those. Jordan Graft on Tuesday was awesome. Corey Shear talking leadership and building a brand that you can trust, which is awesome. And yesterday, Jason, we just ripped it up. That was so much fun. So check those out when you get a chance. And let us know what you think. All right, now we're going to bring our guest in today. This guy's with the Department of Defense and working in the military and all kinds of great stories. So I'm super excited to bring him on the show today. Everybody, please welcome to the show my friend Aaron Schilleci.
Hey Trey,
Aaron,
good morning. How you doing?
What's up, buddy? Good. How are you?
It's great to be here, man. Thank you. I'm in the confines of my car right now on a little covert op doing our show this morning.
Love it.
Here at the Pentagon and everything, and so happy to be here and very grateful and thankful. And I dig the House of Pain jump around on a Friday.
I thought that might be a good one to finish with. I mean, you're at the Pentagon. You got the fatigues on, man. We're just going to totally go with a covert op. You can't even tell us what you're doing. I know. We're just going to not even ask because that's how it works. But it's great to have you on the show today and to talk a little bit about what's happening, in the world right now. So tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and a little about what you're doing right now, whatever you can share with us.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. So first off, I'm a very grateful person that for the majority of my career, I've just been, in the right place at the right time. I was born and raised in the Karate Kid Valley out in Southern California.
Nice.
Fighting out with Johnny Lawrence and Daniel Russo. And so, was getting into trouble, joined the military. And for the first couple of years was enlisted, was an intelligence analyst. And then had an opportunity to do what's called the Green to Gold program, where you have an opportunity to earn a commission as an officer. And I did that, did ROTC at UCLA. And props to the Bruins out there. Hopefully we smash the Trojans tomorrow. I don't know how it's going to look. Sometimes we don't show up. I guess we'll see what happens. But, wanted to, go into the Ranger Regiment, jump out of planes from 25,000 feet and all this other kind of stuff. And then I had an instructor my junior year who was an Apache helicopter pilot. And, he's like, hey, take this test. How's your vision? And did all right on the test. Vision's pretty good. And somehow, some way ended up, earning a spot as a Apache helicopter pilot and headed to the 82nd Airborne Division. I was able to serve in the 82nd. And that's the story division from jumping into Normandy and all that kind of stuff in World War II.
Yeah.
Proud paratrooper over here. Was fortunate enough to serve in that division from 2003 to 2010. Deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times as a junior company grade officer and as a company commander. And then after 2010, made the transition for my family's sake over to Southern California. And thought I was going to go to law school. I ended up actually transitioning full-time into the National Guard. And that's where I find myself today. I ended up actually deploying again. As a Black Hawk pilot this time, so I'm qualified in multiple aircraft, and was fortunate to do levels of command and staff work there in the California Army National Guard. I was fortunate enough to get selected to go to the National War College over here in Washington, D.C., and it's an amazing college and school where we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But from there, ended up going to what's called the CAG, the Chiefs Action Group. Sounds kind of like an X-Men thing. It isn't. I worked directly for the chief of the National Guard Bureau, one of the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's kind of like a think tank, and I was able to champion a lot of his initiatives in modernization and development of technologies and stuff like that, and warrior care. We just passed a Veterans Day recently, and so a lot of initiatives we're able to do to champion those causes. And then now I find myself as the chief of operations and training for the entire Army National Guard. So I'm very grateful. I'm very blessed. And that's my story so far, and I'm sticking to it.
That's an incredible story. And first of all, thank you so much for your service, man. Really do appreciate it. And guys like you who are willing to throw yourself into the mix and make sure that we're protecting and defending the freedoms and liberties that we have means a lot. And you're a lifer, man. You're in for good. I don't see you stopping anytime soon. It sounds like you're in the right place and you absolutely love what you're doing.
It's crazy. You know what, Trey? You have a lot of mentors as you come up, and I found that there's like three things that keep people in or out of the military, right? And so the first of which, and you could adopt this into any profession, really. Number one, what's your identity? Are you your job, or are you more than that? I found that with the military, it's a couple of chapters in my book of life, and there's far more to be written. And there's a lot more people that that they're kind of struggling with that a little bit. Number two, what's your purpose? Does your job continue to give you purpose? Are you finding what should be your purpose every day, and are you living a purposeful life? And then lastly, and I think it's something that people might struggle with the most, or they haven't even figured out yet, is what's your value? And there's a lot of people in the military that, believe it or not, they don't know their value in the civilian world. It might strike you that a lot of people who are ridiculously talented in the military, who would be ridiculously talented in the civilian world, they don't even know. They haven't figured it out. And so it's balancing those different lines of effort that, kind of keeps things going sometimes,
Do you think that last one, because that's really fascinating, you talk about not knowing your value. Do you think that's one of the reasons why, veterans tend to struggle sometimes when they try to, incorporate back into civilian life?
Absolutely. I think that, a real quick story, because I can't help myself, right? So, one of my really good friends, as a military guy, we have people who in our lives who are like enamored with the military. Like, oh my God, it's nothing like, oh my God, how many people did you kill? It's nothing crazy or psycho like that. It's more like this show. More, I want to learn about leadership. I want to learn about, HR development. I want to learn about organizational development, leadership development. And so I had a buddy who now is the president of an extremely successful executive placement firm. He's just crushing it. And he asked me one day, we're sitting down eating chicken kebabs. He said, hey, what's the most difficult thing you've ever done in the military? And I looked at him and I'm like, do you really want to go over this? And I thought I'd bore him to death, and I told him about it, and then, there was a situation, I'm not going to get into the details really quick, but a situation when I was in Afghanistan, I was a company commander, and one of my aircraft crashed, and I had to deal with one of my guys died. And one of the other guys, in Apache's a tandem seat aircraft, one guy in the front, one guy in the back, right? One of the other guys was hurt really, really badly. And, these are obstacles and hurdles that I don't expect civilian people to deal with from a combat perspective, but maybe loss is something people in the civilian world have dealt with, but just maybe not in combat. But nonetheless, I explained to him this story, and he just stood there and he's like, dude, is there any way that you could put that together in a product that we could do like a thing where we talk to like 40 or 50 CEOs or CFOs and they got to hear what you had to say. I'm like, you really think people would want to hear this? And he's like, no, dude, they really, really would. I'm telling you. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. So I put together this thing called Hellfires to Humanity, because as an Apache pilot, I have to throw something in there about a Hellfire mission, right?
That's right.
So we it was a presentation of a bunch of pictures, no words, that were woven together through my narrative, and it's 100% authentic, and I think that's what really got to people, about pictures of the situation and just what happened and everything else, and if there's a silver lining at the end of the story, the bereaved spouse, she's doing fantastic, and the bereaved her son has graduated college, played in North Carolina State as a football player, is doing great. But and she leads like the charge with other Gold Star families now too. But what I learned after I gave this presentation is that there was an hour of Q&A. People were interested. And I'm like, oh my God, you want to talk about it? Okay, what's up? And so, dude, when I was done, I had like 4 or 5 people with business cards coming up to me going, hey, yeah, so we'd like to get this presentation here, here, and here. And send me a proposal, and like, we'll talk about it. And I'm looking at my buddy. I'm like, dude, what am I supposed to do with this? And
Yeah.
so anyway, it's to demonstrate that like you do have value, and people do have funds. Like in the military, we have training budgets. Businesses have training budgets too. And
Yeah.
I think once you figure that out and you tap into that, it's really valuable. And I'm very fortunate to have many friends, one of whom you and I share, Jim Segrist, who's a phenomenal friend and mentor to me and to you, and I'm very grateful to be here probably because of him. But you've just got to look at your friends and you look at your network, and you got to be able to listen to these people that might know a little more than you and trust them, and you never know what'll happen,
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I think there's a fascination with what happens in the military because we just don't know, and we know that the military is hyper focused on training, hyper focused on discipline, hyper focused on things that in the civilian world we can kind of get away with not being hyper focused on those. So I think there's a an expectation of something totally different when you talk to somebody in the military and the stories that they share. Speaking of which, we just had an election that happened. We had Veterans Day last week, or a week out of that, and we've got some new things happening around the country that you were talking about from a defense perspective. What are you guys working on right now that you can share?
Right. So what to share? So everybody should know that like whenever, and again, this is not partisan. I'm not allowed to do that, nor would I stain your fantastic program with anything like that. But every time a new administration comes in, there's these strategic level documents called the first of which is called a National Security Strategy, which basically it's authored by the SecDef, the Secretary of Defense, and it underwrites how the department is going to behave and what the priorities are going to be for like the next 4 years. And I mean, it's not just the 4 years. I mean, I say 4 years because that's, the administration, of course, but it's long range. We're talking about like 2040, 2050 stuff, investments in modernization, excuse me, in technology. And then there's also the National Defense Strategy. So you take it down. So, you've got the National Security Strategy. Well, there's other people that are involved in security, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security. There's a lot of people, but there's a National Defense Strategy, and that's specifically tailored from the Pentagon. So National Security Strategy is written by the President. National Defense Strategy is authored and signed by the SecDef, right? And that sets the priorities for defense. So specifically, like, are we going to get more F-35 fighter jets? Are we going to invest in like littoral combat ships? Are we going to, try and put people on the moon in a defense perspective? What are we going to do, right? So there's that. And then there's a whole other strategy called a National Military Strategy. So for a lot of the Department of Defense, so half of the Department of Defense are people that don't even wear a uniform, right? They work for the Office of Secretary of Defense. There's contractors. Well, there's the whole military side too. And so there's actually a national military strategy, and that's going to come out here in a little bit, the unclassified version, and that's going to outline the military priorities. So like, what are we going to do with China? What are we going to do with, Russia? What does Iran look like? And, some, violent extremist groups, and how do we handle all that stuff all around the world? So it's never a dull moment. And what's fortunate is that I've been very, very lucky to have exercised around the tactical arena, flying around, the battlefield and doing all that kind of stuff. But then I've also been blessed to be working at the strategic level and using my brain with people who are much smarter than I am to help, digest these documents and kind of push some initiatives for the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. So it's been great.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and you're helping write these documents. You're helping put these strategies together, which is just phenomenal. It's crazy to think about that, and the attention to detail and how long you have to think out. When you think of current struggles that were happening right now with the war in Ukraine and all the things that the China potentially wanting to invade Taiwan and different things that are happening around the world, how does that really factor in when you think about these documents, or are those small term events that you almost think about moving past? I mean, we don't expect that war to last forever, but what do you guys, how do you guys attack all that?
I think a good way to think about this is it could be underpinned in self-preservation, right? So, no matter what you hear, no matter what you see, and again, this is Aaron's perspective. This is not written anywhere. I got to put like the statement out there. This is not attribute. The DOD is not on the hook for what I'm about.
These thoughts are my own.
Exactly, right. And somebody can put that across the screen. I think that people are worried about nuclear weapons and all this other stuff. There's one of the things we deal with is called nuclear deterrence theory, right? And that has to do with like, how do you prevent a nuclear war? Essentially, is what it boils down to. And you prevent a nuclear war by having nuclear weapons. And it kind of like keeps everybody in check. And it's all based off like rational deterrence. Well, what happens when one of the people that are playing this game are not rational, right? As like Putin might allude to some of the ways he's behaving. But what's interesting, though, is that if you kind of look at, you read the tea leaves and you kind of look and see what's going on, I don't see it going. I don't necessarily see, again, this is my words, these are no one else's. I don't see anybody really hitting the red button anytime soon. I think there's a lot of realities that are coming to light with regard to successes that the Ukrainian military has had, and some defeats that the Russian military has had. And there's a lot of realities for Vladimir Zelensky that might be coming to fruition too. It's a large ask to try and, I always say that like your aspirations have to equal your capabilities. Like I want to see a herd of unicorns one day, but they don't exist. So that's right. Going to be kind of hard. If you want every soldier out of Russia that's in, terrain that was once Ukraine, that is something awesome to want, but do you have the capabilities to do it, and how long, and what's the price of that? So that's something that Zelensky is going to have to figure out with his people, and so that's something to figure out. And I also think, turning the page to China, that's a huge priority of ours, I'll say, and that's, you could read that anywhere really. But I think the number one priority for the Chinese government and military, and if you look, if you think about China, we're a blink of an eye in their history, really. If you look at Chinese history, Chinese history is not measured in days, it's measured in centuries, and I think that, one of President Xi's number one priorities is dynastic durability. And he wants to stay in power. As you're watching through their quote unquote democratic process. If you're watching, he wants to stay in charge for a long time, and he doesn't want to upset that apple cart in any way militarily. You saw productive, I guess what could be called productive talks with he and Biden. And, the number one goal is just not to go to war. We're really for the benefit of, humanity, because if, we start throwing blows with them, it's not going to be good for anyone. And with regards to Taiwan and things like that, again, these are my words, not no one else's. You just have to look at what's the price that China's willing to pay, and the truth is, they've not been tested. And you look and see what happened to Russia when they went into Ukraine with a lot of metrics of comparison that were very hard metrics, like how many tanks do we have, how many aircraft do we have, how many artillery pieces do we have, how many munitions do we have, but they didn't test or throw a metric out on the will. And that's not something that you could put a metric on if you've not been tested. And you look at the will of the Russian soldiers versus the will of the Ukrainian soldiers. You look at the will of the Russian people versus the will of the Ukrainian people, and will gets a vote. And I think that's not necessarily something or a concept people are taking into consideration with China. As Mike Tyson always says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's right.
And China's never been punched in the face recently, so you don't necessarily know how it would go down. And I don't really think they want to know.
It's interesting when you say it like that. Yeah, and I like what you said, that your aspirations, to go back to that for a minute, your aspirations have to equal your capabilities, and if your aspirations are too big, then you have to increase your capabilities to try to match with that. But it's a fascinating statement about that, right?
But what happens?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, please forgive me.
No, go ahead.
But what happens when your aspirations are too big and you've got to recage? And does that mean that you lose face? Does it mean you become a great leader by admitting that maybe you got it wrong a little bit, and you gain more momentum and more will by coming up with a better plan? I mean, there's all kinds of things to think about that and pull that straight.
Yeah, no, it is, and certainly from a leadership perspective, which I want to transition to, talk a minute about your time at the War College and some of the things you've really learned about leadership, specifically from your time in the military.
So I think that it doesn't matter how many helicopters I have, it doesn't matter how much money I have, it doesn't matter what condition any of that stuff's in. None of it happens without people. And I've always felt that with regards to capital, whether it's equipment, money, or time, people are the most important capital that you have. And I think no matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter what profession you have to care about your people. I mean, I'm starting this new job right now over here in aviation operations and training. And like the first thing I'm doing is like counseling each and every one of them. And there's a lot of people, right? Getting to know who they are, getting to know their nuances, getting to know their families, and so, I think that, operations move at the speed of trust, and the currency of trust is communication. And so if you start early on with building that trust through being vulnerable, and through, like, a lot of leaders, dude, you've been burned so many times. You don't want to trust people, dude. This is going to end up, in an investigation. I don't want, look, that might have been something that happened to you and you might have gotten burned. But if you're going to succeed, you've got to trust openly and sincerely, and people will be able to see that. And already in a week, people are starting to knock on the door. Hey, sir, I was thinking about blah, 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 blah. Hey, what are your thoughts on this? It's already starting to take effect, And I would throw that down, that the number one priority for me as a leader has got to be trust.
I love that. And I just wrote it down because I thought it was so well said, that operations move at the speed of trust, and the currency of trust is communication. That is so good. And to go back to your point real quick about people and the will of people and the will of a military, last year we studied the American Revolution with our daughters. We took a trip. We did kind of the, from Virginia up to New York and Boston area. We got to learn all about that and the history of it. And when you realize that, I mean, how in the world does the American, Army, the military, the Continental, Army, how do they defeat the largest at the time superpower in the world, in the British, in the Redcoats? It's like, how does that happen? And
when you think about it, no. I mean, you could look at that from a literal or rhetorical standpoint, right, Trey? I mean, will is built and grows through shared hardship, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going, like, if you and your wife have gone through something hard together, it builds you together or it tears you apart, right? But if you're able to survive through it together, your will and your resilience continues to grow. And I mean, if you look at all, and in succession, these soldiers having to fight over and over and over together. I mean, they're worrying about the person to the left and the right, but they trust each other, to make each other successful through all those battles and stuff. But it's a great question.
It is, and the will of the people is so powerful. And Scott, who was in the reserves for 20 years, he's in the military as well.
Yeah.
So thank you, Scott, for your service. He said you'll be surprised at new ideas of a soldier if he's given the opportunity to speak it. And I think that's true in business too. Like if people feel they have the ability to speak up with an idea, they're trusted, then really great ideas can come to the front. But if they don't feel that, they're going to hold them to themselves. They're not going to share, and the whole company's going to miss out. So I love that aspect of leadership that you talked about.
Yeah.
All right. So, Aaron, listen, we got to pause for a minute because every day we like to celebrate the national day, whatever it is. Veterans Day was last Friday, but every day is a national day of something, often silly, but sometimes good. Do you know what today's national day is?
Is it like National Gummy Bear Day or something?
You're close. You're close. It's actually National Sandwich Day.
It's like my favorite food.
I know. It's like you can't go wrong with a sandwich. What's your favorite go-to sandwich? If you could have only one more sandwich the rest of your life, what would it be?
It'd be like my wife's brisket sandwich. I mean, that's like slap your grandma good.
That does sound like a good sandwich, and it's getting close to lunchtime here, so I'm getting pretty hungry. That sounds great. For me, this one isn't like slap your grandma good type of thing, but my dad used to make it. It's called a Frankfurter. It sounds weird, but my dad had about 7 meals growing up. He was a single dad. He had about 7 meals that contained hot dogs. And so this one, you cut it down the middle and flop it open. So you flop the hot dog open, you grill it both sides, and then you put it on a piece of toast with ketchup and mustard. It's not like delicious, but it reminds me of my dad. So I would, he passed away 17 years ago. I would have that sandwich every day if I had to, because that reminds me of my dad. So National Sandwich Day, everybody. Make sure you go out and get a sandwich. Let us know what your favorite sandwich is if you're in the comments. Tell us what you like to go after. And then also, Aaron, we got to finish with this. We always have a random question of the day.
Sure.
This is a question that our podcast producer Ruth puts together every day. So I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if it's good, if it's bad, if it's funny, if it's serious. So let's go ahead and throw up the random question of the day today. It is, which is the most boring superhero? Are you a superhero guy?
I am.
Oh, okay. Which one is the most boring to you?
Let's see here. I think Green Lantern's boring.
Yeah.
Just like underperforms, dude. So like maybe a superhero. I mean, even his movie sucked. I mean, you didn't even need the movie to tell you how boring that guy is. I mean, when Deadpool can beat you out, I mean, I think you're good.
I love that hot take, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the most underwhelming superheroes that we have. So I'm gonna go with you on that one. I think that's a pretty good take. The Green Lantern might not make it in the military. I don't know. What do you think?
No.
I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, Ant-Man could probably overtake him.
Oh, it's great. Okay, good question, Ruth. That's a good question. Not a bad one. Everyone out there in the comments, let us know which superhero you think is the most boring, and if we're right about Green Lantern. Appreciate that. All right, so Aaron, let's finish with this. We got just a couple of minutes left. If you had the opportunity to speak to a crowd of young people in particular, specifically about leadership and about their life, what would you share with them?
I would share that you're enough. I struggled my entire my entire childhood with a massive inferiority complex. And it didn't help when I was 5'2" when I started high school. I'm 6'2" now. That didn't help anything. But I've got 4 kids, 14, 10, 8 and 4. And you got to tell kids, you got to coach them that they're enough. It's always better. It's like a quote out of the movie Rockstar. It's always better to, fail as yourself than succeed as somebody else. And I just remember so many times being a poser and wearing whatever, or when I had hair, with my hair and whatever, and not wanting to take a leadership role because I was going to get judged, and at the end of the day, I mean, none of it matters and you're enough. And I think that's certainly important. I think it's something that doesn't get said enough to, our young people.
Man, we're going to end on that. That is so good, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us today and just sharing your experience. I know this went really fast, and you probably have tons more that you could share. We'll have to have you back on and talk more about that. But appreciate you being on the show, man. It was great.
Trey, thanks, brother. I really appreciate you. Have a great Thanksgiving to you and your family and everybody on the call, on the show. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And if you need anything, you know where to find me, bro.
Oh, we will. And everybody watching the show, again, thanks so much for being a part of this show. Make sure you come back on Monday. We're going to be talking with Jory Myers about dispatch services, which the FMCSA just clarified. So we're going to have a great show about that. And because it's Friday, everybody, in 1 hour, we got word on the street. We're going to have Lindsay Trent on the show. She's with Next Gen Trucking, talking about getting the generation that's going to be taking over trucking, which is supply chain, man. It's important. It's everywhere now. We know that. And so we'll talk to you guys here in just a little bit. We'll see you next week on Monday for Standing Out. Have a great weekend, everybody. Aaron, thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Trey. Take it easy, bro.